Welcome to the webinar. We will be beginning in just a moment. In fact, actually, we're going to go get started. Welcome, everybody. Today's session, we're going to be talking about Project Cortex. And you've got two speakers today. We're going to be talking about 7 ways that Project Cortex delivers business value. I'm Joel Oleson. I'm an Microsoft MVP and Microsoft Regional Director. I'm a director at Proficient, which is a consulting company who provides services around Microsoft. You can find me on Twitter. My technical blog is collabshow.com. And with me, I have Ross Lair. Ross, you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon and good morning, everybody, as appropriate. I look forward to speaking with everybody today. Joel asked me to just do a quick introduction on myself, and I'm the CEO of WAND Incorporated. Our company has been building taxonomies literally since 1983. And Joel asked, gee whiz, what's the history of all this? And I started thinking, and actually it goes back to my 8th grade semantics class with Mrs. Henry. And in the 8th grade, I took a semantics class learning about semantics, and that started me off. Okay, the meaning of words, And in college, I had a major, actually a minor in philosophy, and studied knowledge. Okay, Aristotle, the general, the specific. Okay, how people organize information. So it's always been very interesting in taxonomies. I've always been, involved into. We started to develop taxonomies, some time ago. When Microsoft announced this crazy thing called SharePoint 2010, it had a new feature called the Taxonomy Term Store. And that's when we developed a relationship with Microsoft, where over the past 10 years, we've been providing a free general business taxonomy to probably almost 10,000 people up to this point. Project Cortex is a breakthrough, and I'm going to let Joel take it from here. But that's kind of the send a note of thanks to Mrs. Henry. But Joel, back to you.
That's great. I've been working in the Microsoft space for a long time. You may know me from the SharePoint world or even Microsoft Teams. I've been working with. I started back in the 90s working at Microsoft as a consultant, as a contractor, and I was hired on as a full-time employee in Microsoft IT way back in 2000 to basically take what Jeff Teeper and the product team were working on, it was called Tahoe at the time, and bringing that into the Microsoft IT data center and helping set things up. And let me tell you, working with the business at Microsoft and trying to figure out taxonomies was actually one of the things that I thought it was really interesting to find out they actually had a librarian on staff that was part of the intranet team. And that was just fascinating to me to imagine that, wow, is there that kind of thing going on, just trying to organize data. And at Microsoft, they had 7 different ways that they would organize the company from top to bottom. One of the things that I think is really important, and kind of just diving in a little bit here, is just how much data we're generating. 90% of data in existence was generated in the last 2 years. Now think about that from your organization perspective.
Joel, can I jump in
Sure,
a second?
sure.
I think you need to show your screen.
I thought I was sharing my screen. Let me
I've done that. You want to know something? I've done that a bunch of times.
My controls went away for a second, so I thought I was. Here I am looking at this at the beautiful clouds going through, and
good.
Figured that everybody else was looking at the pretty clouds as well. Now I feel guilty that everybody's going to miss the clouds.
Well, give it a second. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting how Microsoft has been building AI into PowerPoint even. This ability to design ideas actually comes from artificial intelligence too. It's like, let's see what the person's trying to do. It's like Clippy on steroids. And as well, video and audio and all these types of things are really integrating. You think this, even think about this slide deck. It's going to be stored. How do we retrieve this later on? So this idea of, people talk about big data, or the mass data that an organization is pumping out, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about structured data or unstructured data. Organizations are producing tons and tons of information, and especially we have more and more ways to tap into it with IoT, but even things like SharePoint and your file shares and your OneDrive, and even all the chats and things you're having in Teams. We're generating data all the time. In fact, there was a statistic that every person is generating something like 1.6 megabytes per minute or something like that, just in terms of data that we're producing with like walking around with your phone, and especially when we're posting on social media. But you think about it, from all the pictures and all of the data that we're pushing out there, 90% of data in existence was generated in the last 2 years. And what's interesting is you talk about, Forrester is talking about how all this data is not being included in analytics, but think as well about how much is being generated, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, in your business, and yet it's not actually being included in how we're doing business. There's a gap between our data strategy and our business strategy. So how can we solve that gap? And talking about this gap, one of my favorite quotes when talking about knowledge management, especially when you look to the future, is this one from Lou Platt, who was a former CEO of HP and who was the CEO at the time, says, if HP knew what HP knows, we would be 3 times more productive. Interesting. So what is he thinking about? Why would he say such a thing? I think there's some people who hear that and they think, is he saying they're stupid? Or is he saying that they just don't have access to the things they know? And I think that it is actually the latter. He's essentially saying, we're producing information, we're doing all these analytics, but we don't actually have access to our data. Our people are not connected to our data. And I think that problem is a great problem statement as we approach Project Cortex and understanding Project Cortex. Now, the agenda for today, I want to talk about AI and how AI is really a game changer. And when you talk about even internet time and how time kind of goes, and we have all this newer technology, and it pushes us into the future in terms of our ability to have access to our data. And there's really these quantum leaps and bounds that actually take place with technology, like when we went from personal PCs that are disconnected to then connecting our network PCs, and kind of that evolution of things. This next phase of getting to leverage artificial intelligence and leveraging not even just say quantum computing, I think that's a little bit further out, but there's essentially paradigm shifts that are happening, and I want to make sure I talk about how AI in the enterprise is a massive game changer, and I want to talk about what Microsoft has actually done with AI. Then we're going to talk about some of the business value of Project Cortex, and then I want to tell you about things that you can actually do with Project Cortex to accelerate it, and that's absolutely where Ross and WAND come in. Is they've done a bunch of things to help you get ready for Project Cortex in terms of helping it be successful, accelerating your Project Cortex deployment. So let's talk about AI in the enterprise, which is really new. Not a lot of companies have been using AI in the enterprise, but I think it's fun to tell a story, especially to give you context. How many people on the call have seen Indiana Jones, and you remember at the very end of the movie, I think it was Raiders of the Lost Ark, yeah, that's the one, and they find the Ark, and it ends up, they put it in this warehouse, and it zooms out, and you realize, wow, that's the last time we're going to see the Ark. It's going to get lost again. And I think it's kind of a nod a little bit to this idea of the problems we actually have today around categorization, around finding information. You know, I think we often even say, oh, as long as it's got a barcode, I'll be able to find it again. But it's only as good as the metadata. You know, it's the ARC, and even if you got a barcode, essentially some kind of label, how are we going to be able to find that? And it was actually a conversation I had with Ross, and I want you to come back on, Ross, to just talk about this museum problem that's happening. We think we've given all these brilliant scientists, or the people, Smithsonian's, all these museums, where we've given them our crown jewels, and what's happening in museums?
Yeah, it's a big problem. I'm just going to read, this is an interesting study. Quote, as many as half of all natural history specimens held in some of the world's greatest institutions are probably wrongly labeled, according to experts at Oxford University and the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh. The confusion has arisen because even accomplished naturalists struggle to tell the difference between similar plants and insects, and with hundreds or thousands of specimens arriving at once, it can be too time-consuming to meticulously research each, and guesses have to be made. Oh, and human indexers get tired. Joel, back to you.
Yeah, I like that. Getting tired. I think that I wish that it was only people getting tired. I think people are tired of tagging because they don't see it making a difference. And I also think that people just don't get it. But as well, there's a few statistics here, and I realize I kind of reinforced this point a little bit. 97.2% of organizations are investing in big data and AI. 500 billion office documents were created last year. I'd ask you how many were created in your organization. 16 billion faxes sent last year, 853 miles of paper. And it's talking about stacked on top of each other. It's incredible just how much data we're generating. So we talk about that data problem of there's so much data, and our ability to understand it or find what's important in it. But as well, in information management especially, there's these challenges. So I want to talk about these. These are actually defined by Microsoft, and I really resonate with these too. The silos of knowledge. I think, you know, in SharePoint, we have the sites, and then we have the libraries, and then we have the folders, you know, if you're creating folders. But essentially, even within a site, you've got silos. And even within, obviously, a single tenant, you've got all these different sites, different permissions on them, different organizations are doing different things with them. And you say, well, search solves that, right? All I have to do is do a search. But the problem is you need to know what you're searching for. And search, actually, which leads to the next one, is there's actually a big problem in search and discovery, where I can even tell you just in the last week, I write a PowerPoint and I think it's perfect, and I click save, and then I forget about it. And just a couple days later, I know that I created that PowerPoint, and somebody has to be hiding it from me because I can't find it. I don't know if it's in my OneDrive. I don't know if it's in my SharePoint site. I don't know if it's on my hard drive, but I'm sure I'm wasting 10, 15 minutes sometimes trying to find the PowerPoint I was already working on. And that's even just my own tagging, tracking problem, let alone what happens inside of an organization. And that's getting better. You know, obviously, Windows is getting more connected to what's happening inside of Microsoft 365, SharePoint, and so on, where it can show us. You go to office.com and you can see what you've been working on recently, as long as you've been storing it in the right place. So it's when you store it on your hard drive, we have problems these days of, you know, which search is going to give me the document that's going to solve this. So search continues to be a problem for sure. And then there's that untapped knowledge. Think about it. You've got all these experts inside your company who are working on things, but how much of that knowledge is actually in their head? And then it leads to the thing, the knowledge drain. As soon as that head walks outside your organization, finds a better offer somewhere else, or various reasons why people move on, there's the knowledge drain that happens. think about it as well from that perspective of a new employee. How quickly does it take to ramp up? And that's a huge cost. That's a huge burden. Finding the right people, you get them in, and then it takes them how many months or years to be fully productive? That's a big problem, and it's an opportunity, you could say. So this idea of understanding knowledge, there's really two types of knowledge: the tacit knowledge and the explicit knowledge. And I think around knowledge management, it is important to be able to distinguish the differences between these two. And we say that 5% of knowledge is actually explicit knowledge. This is the knowledge that's actually in your documents, in your records, in your files, in the information. And then we have 95% that is this tribal knowledge. It's the experience. It's when I was referring to the knowledge that's in people's heads, that's the tacit knowledge. The connections and the synapses between, hey, this is how I do this thing when this other thing happens. It's the rules and the knowledge and the experience, the thinking and the commitment and the competence and deeds and so on that is really where most of our knowledge actually is. People are the valuable resources, and what they hold is useful, but here's the key: so far more if shared with others. And as it relates to Project Cortex, as you'll see in the near future, as we go through this, our ability to tap into that tacit knowledge is one of the keys here as well. You know, absolutely, Project Cortex will be reasoning over your data that exists in files, but actually, how can we capture the conversations and capture that and get it stored for the tacit knowledge as well? Now, let's talk about AI. Artificial intelligence is something, deep learning. There's a ton of patents. You could say that this is a bit of a gold rush that's going on. And I don't think you have to look very far to realize China is very interested in AI. Silicon Valley is very, very interested in AI. In fact, you look at these companies, Microsoft, Alphabet, which is Google, Intel, Qualcomm, these companies are investing huge in patents around artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, neural networks. 154,000 patents filed since 2010. And this is from a 2018 article, or at least from a report that was done toward the end of 2018. It's probably actually produced in 2019, but think about that for a second. And look at the number one, Microsoft. Microsoft is a leader in the AI space, dominating all categories of AI patents, of deep learning and neural networks. That's huge. So what is Microsoft doing with all of these patents? It leads us to Project Cortex. Obviously, there's a ton of research. I've gathered a little bit of that for you here. It's called Azure Cognitive Services. Now, anybody right now can go build their own solutions around facial detection or object detection or emotion, or the translation services and analytics and spell checking, or the search things like visual search and connectors and auto suggest and various search APIs. There's the Q&A maker, kind of bot cool stuff related to, again, more image search and knowledge graph and Microsoft graph. And then the speech ones, speech to text, text to speech. Hey, who is speaking? So you got the facial detection, but you've also got speech recognition. And there's even some various consumer type services. So you think about all these APIs, Microsoft investing huge in Azure. Think about it, it could cost you millions to try and build solutions, and obviously various stages, right? If you're looking for one or two of these things, but imagine Microsoft building a product that takes advantage of all of these cognitive services and making it accessible to the enterprise, making it accessible to your end users, and enters Project Cortex, right? So let's talk about Project Cortex and what it is. But before we do, I want to just launch a poll just to understand who has spent some time with Project Cortex. I want to make sure, here we go. So we're going to be launching the poll, which is, what stage are you at with Project Cortex? And I understand that Project Cortex is brand new. It hasn't even launched yet. There may be some people who are in private preview. There may be some people who have already spent enough time to know that this is something they plan to do. And then this is, hey, I'm just really just looking at this, trying to investigate. I don't even know exactly how many people are actually in the private preview, but I've been very anxious just to understand more and more around this. I was kind of in the content services program that Microsoft has as a partner. I've been able to get some exposure to it, and it's a fascinating product, and I'm excited to share what I've learned about it. So with that, I am going to go ahead and close the poll. Thanks, everybody. So basically, I'm going to just kind of speak to this a little bit. 57% on here are just investigating. 30% say, hey, this is my first exposure. There's 11% who say we're planning on deploying, and 2% who are in the private preview. So it's a good representation. It also tells me that more than half, this is fairly new to them. So I do want to make sure you guys get a good understanding of Project Cortex. And I've done some research myself and some, say, visual models to help people understand Project Cortex. So here we go. Microsoft has actually put out a couple of different visuals. You'll actually see the one on the right in the UI. You'll see the one on the left as soon as you go to aka.ms/Project Cortex. And we're going to go there in a minute, so you'll actually see that pop up. But there's a nice little one-liner. Project Cortex applies AI to automatically organize your content and deliver innovative experiences. And so here's some of those experiences. Topic cards, topic pages, knowledge centers, plural. There are 2 different types of knowledge centers in Office, Outlook, and Microsoft Teams. And actually, that's the simplified view. There's actually integration with Yammer. There's integration with the Power Platform. There's integration with those Azure services, as an example. The AI models. There's the Power Automate integration. There's anyway, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot. Even Word has integration with Project Cortex. So, and even on the right, another kind of idea, I think it's okay to think about Project Cortex as a machine. So let me start with the one on the left. You have your content, AI reasons over that content. It essentially establishes these topic cards and pages, and it highlights those terms across the tools we use every day. That's a very high level understanding of Project Cortex. The one on the right, here we're putting our data, we're basically teaching the machine. It can highlight that content, but as well, it can actually do automation. It can do all sorts of interesting things around tagging, labeling, extracting, grouping, organizing our content. And we'll dig into all this. But I want you to think about it as there really are kind of 2 different views. The one where it makes our tools light up, and then the other one where we're actively participating in teaching the machine to do things with our data. So this is a Microsoft slide. 3 key areas: manage, connect, manage, and protect your content. So here we have the AI, security, and workflows. And you can see the machine there where they're putting stuff in again, where you actually get advanced analytics around what's happening. There's the organizing, automatically connecting, organizing knowledge across teams and systems. And you can actually see an ontological model, these relationships between people and data and information. So this idea that I can actually get a connection between a project or a team site and a meeting and an expert, or even the relationship between this topic and another topic. And we're going to dive into a demo in a minute around this, so you'll be able to see what we're talking about. And then there's the empowering part of it, empowering people with just-in-time knowledge in the apps you use every day. And there we've got basically Outlook with a term that's being highlighted. Now, another way of looking at this is this idea of kind of three key areas: information, learning, and knowledge. So on the information side, we have this AI-driven recognition, where it's the forms processing, entity extraction side of it. The learning side is the AI models, insights, analytics, and there's this AI human topic curation, where basically AI will recommend topics, humans approve or say, no, 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 that's not what we need, and basically reject. And then the bottom part here is this knowledge summarization. And this is basically a lot of what's been going on in these AI advancements, is this idea that AI can reason over a document. You can give it 100 pages and it can come back and give you a summary. Super powerful. Systematic inferencing, deep neural networks, the knowledge graph, building all those connections. And the last little model here for you, I like this one. You have the import, which basically comes from connectors, where you have your videos, your images, audio, all sorts of files, unstructured and structured files, that basically gets imported. And then you've got this tagging, organizing, finding aspect to it. Project Cortex does its job, which is smart ingestion, classification, extraction, insights, and analytics to be able to kind of supervise activities, performances, kick off all sorts of fun stuff. And we'll dive into this. And to do that, I want to introduce something that I've been working on with WAND, is basically an infographic. And this infographic, you can get it. In fact, you probably already saw it. It's on collabshow.com. It's 7 innovative ways Microsoft Project Cortex delivers business value. And I think a lot of people are trying to wrap their head around Project Cortex. I don't get it. Sure, it's AI, but why are we building a product around this? What does it actually do? It's connecting knowledge and expertise across Microsoft 365 and beyond. And you can kind of see, I put a bunch of logos there of the different tools that it integrates with. These are tools we use every day. Now, this is a visual, big fan of this visual, where it's something I kind of put together, where it's like you've got, when in AI, there's really the machine learning side of it, and then there's the machine teaching side of it. And the machine teaching side has different names. Microsoft calls it machine teaching. Other AI models call it different things. But essentially, and this is where the rubber meets the road a little bit. In SharePoint, there is a new knowledge center. The knowledge center I like to refer to as the organizational Wikipedia. This is where all your topic pages live. And yes, that gets lit up inside of SharePoint when you activate Project Cortex. So what does the Knowledge Center do? It is a collection of these it's the topic center. It's essentially a list of all these topic cards and pages. And it does the clustering, grouping, filtering, extracting into the Knowledge Center. On the other side of the house, we have the Content Center, which is the machine teaching. If you do nothing with Project Cortex, this will be empty. The other side of the house, you're going to get a bunch of suggestions from AI, where it's come up with a bunch of interesting things. All you have to do is approve the things you like, and it will go to town. On the Content Center side, it needs to be taught. It can then be built. You can build models, you can build automation, it can do classification, it can do labeling. Essentially, it's a training facility to do classification, extraction, and so on. Now, if you're saying, well, isn't there another third to this? Absolutely. So that bottom part here is the reinforcement. This is where the humans get plugged into this aspect of Project Cortex. We have the seeding, which is essentially you can seed new topics, taxonomies, acronyms, and so on. You can validate what the AI has been recommending on both sides of this, and you can essentially manage it. So the management interface is saying, include this, block this, here's your blocked terms, all the seeding as well as in that management interface. But essentially, it's a relationship now between the robots and the humans. This reinforcement is, hey, we don't just let them go wild, we actually interact with them to essentially understand what can be done here. And if it's not, we'll dive into this in the demo. But I want to start introducing some of these business value things, and we'll jump into the demo. So really, there's the first three things, and we're going to kind of cover them all together. Empower teams with knowledge and expertise in the apps you use every day. Number two, advanced artificial intelligence to harness collective knowledge. And then connecting people to knowledge and knowledge to people. So with that, I am actually going to jump into the demo. And this demo is one where everybody can actually come here, aka.ms/Project Cortex. Highly encourage everyone, go here, bookmark it. This is a place where it basically takes you to all the resources around Project Cortex. And I want you to get familiar with it. I mentioned the little, the image that Microsoft likes to kind of put out there. Here's one of them, content with AI, with the tools we use every day, right? If we scroll down, you'll see Microsoft is doing an every other Wednesday morning, there's a Project Cortex office hours. So if you have any questions or you want to meet with the team, Ignite was actually where the big rollout was. So there's a link to the keynote, a link to the Jared Spataro's session and Jeff Teeper's session. And we scroll down a little bit further. This is the how you get into the private preview. And you can sign up for the newsletter or ask about the partner program. And scroll all the way to the bottom. This is actually where the demos are. So don't be afraid of the form. A lot of people think forms are at the bottom. For some reason, they put the resources below the form. And right here, we could get there's a 1-minute Mott McDonald video. I was debating whether to stick it in there. I think the key takeaway here is these guys, Mott McDonald, is using Project Cortex to establish this vision of connected thinking, connecting people to knowledge and knowledge to people. There's also a 90-minute or 90-second walkthrough that's a nice, super high-level one. And then this Microsoft Mechanics Live with Naomi. This is a serious deep dive where she does some machine teaching. So we're going to jump into this demos. And the first one we're going to do is this empowering people with knowledge. This is really a good place to start. This takes us into the knowledge center. Knowledge center being that first one that basically shows us how, here, sure enough, we have a term, and Project Cortex basically highlights these topics in the tools we use every day. We're going to click on core, and it gives us, hey, this is an acronym. And we have a definition of that acronym. We have experts listed. You can see we can follow these. And when you follow it, it shows up in your interface in the Knowledge Center. So we'll see that in a minute. I can click on it, and I see resources and project details. This is basically scrolling down to be able to see that, yes, there's files associated with it. There's experts associated with it. And there's even that ontological model where we can actually see related projects or related topics to it as well. So now let's jump into the SharePoint side of it. This is the folders. So this is probably a group that I'm in. So if I go to the folders, which obviously here we are now, yep, indeed we are in SharePoint. This is a modern page. In fact, this is a communication site. And so you can see there's some information I've published here, and it's automatically underlined some key topics in here. If I click on this topic, I get the topic card. And instead of just scrolling down, this time we're actually going to click through to the Knowledge Center. Here we are in the Knowledge Center around this particular topic. So we have construction operations reliability with a nice overview, link to a document, some people, oh, check it out, resources that have been assigned to this, that it says are part of this topic. And you'll notice there's added ones as well as discovered ones. So the added ones is basically saying these ones have been approved, and these discovered ones are a little bit more dynamic. but we also see related topics. And this is an ontological model that's actually been grouped, filtered, extracted, and organized. And so we have this construction operations reliability relates to Mark 8 and Project SOAR, but we can actually take it to the next level to see how that relates to different things in the organization. We can then see who the experts who are related to those, or we can navigate to those as well. You can even see there's even SharePoint sites that relate to this topic. They've been marked as related to the topic. And we can quickly navigate to those as well. But there's also a section here called questions and answers, kind of rolling further down, where we actually see conversations that have happened. This particular one comes from Yammer. In the new Yammer, we have questions and answers, including this ability to mark a best answer. So imagine a conversation on a topic that's relevant. It can actually be tied to a topic. So then we can continue to learn more, even with conversations, and they get organized, and it gets pulled right in. These questions and answers can come from Yammer or from Teams, or even manually and added by other people who are here. They can share articles, photos, videos, ideas, and so on, right into the topic. Now let's dive into the My Topics. So here we are in the Knowledge Center. We're at the home page now of the Knowledge Center, and I can see it has trending information. There's what my colleagues are doing, and I can see there's other topics, like here's Mark 8 again, and I can see what's happening in that world, but as well, what the little bit of gamification. Lynn is a top contributor. Here's some experiences and some other topics they're following as well. You can click edit, so this page is being edited, and you can see you can add these interesting knowledge web parts. So there's new web parts that essentially are expanded when you've got Project Cortex on top of SharePoint. Things like LinkedIn Learning, Expertise Finder, and so on. So that takes us back. You can see there's some additional things that you can follow up with on this, where you can see how the content capture works, which we'll go to in just a minute. So let's head back into the slides. So that gives you a bit of an idea of Project Cortex from the Knowledge Center side of things, around understanding how it lights up the UI for users and connects your knowledge to people and people to knowledge. So what is the things it's doing? It's actually taking advantage of advanced AI. So you saw the things in Azure around Azure Cognitive Services, but there's additional things on top of that, like automating the object detection, like summarizing the knowledge, like classifying files, noticing entities and extracting those out of the files. So enhancing search essentially. And then there's even forms processing. So even if you're doing things like forms, you can actually have it do additional work with your forms as well. So it actually works right in tandem with the Power Platform and building models like this object detection as example. And this idea of connecting knowledge to people and people to knowledge. Something that Mott MacDonald's actually been, their focus is on that idea of connecting people to knowledge. Now, the next three things, streamlining business processes, and think about this from a perspective of now you have the ability to, instead of looking at the things file by file, the AI can look and understand patterns around your files. You can actually teach it what a statement of work is like. You can teach it what your contracts are. In fact, you could have dozens of different types of contracts, and it can understand the differences between those contracts. And without even moving the files, it can actually discover those things and do extraction and so on. And we'll look at that in a second. And as well, the discovery that happens. You saw with the Knowledge Center how you can actually follow topics. So as people are adding things or interacting with things or having conversations, it enhances the entire corpus or knowledge base of the entire organization. And what you'll notice as well is this is across topics and platforms. So in Microsoft 365, we have email, We have SharePoint, where we got all our collaboration files, and then we have the conversations that happen on Teams, conversations that may happening in Yammer, all these different places, OneDrive and so on. It feels so in silos, it's all kind of separate, but Project Cortex helps establish these topics, and it can notice these topics as they're being used in these documents to then be able to discover the relationships between the content and the experts and the people. And now think about, what does that do for an organization? It provides agility, it drives efficiencies, it drives cost savings because you can actually move faster, and the automation that essentially we get, not just from a security and compliance perspective, but true business automation as well. So some of those examples of when I think about the gears that are kind of get rolling here, there's the connectors to search. So it's not just Microsoft 365, and you'll see those in a second, but search goes beyond Microsoft 365 to pull that information into the graph, not just indexing, but actually pulling that data into graph. Then there's the labels. So you have the unified labeling system. Imagine now it's looking at this data, and it can do inference, and you can actually train it to do labeling. You can train it to do tagging and extraction. You've got the classifiers. You've got the ability to do capture, content capture, and so on. So it's a very rich integration with the Power Platform, which we'll see in just a minute, but also on the Azure side, the Azure Data Lake from a storage perspective, these Azure Cognitive Services, and even from a classifier perspective, there's things you can do beyond leveraging the Azure services. Now, I think every once in a while it's important to throw these stories in here. Imagine that you've got a house, maybe it's your own house. How many people have tagged or built a book of all of your DVDs or all of your books? You know, you go to a library, we expect them to use the Dewey Decimal System, and that we can walk over to either the note cards, which is kind of the old school system, or we jump over to the computer. Somebody has spent time to categorize all that data. Now imagine in your own house how you would start to organize that, or even a hoarder's house. In their mind, they're organizing, I know I put that magazine over in this stack next to the lamp, but if somebody moves the lamp, they're going to forget where that that Mickey Mantle baseball card is being stored, as an example. Now, some hoarders, they just know that it's useful at some point, but there's others that they understand where the piles are, and they can actually still find things. It's really funny when it starts talking about that kind of thing. I mentioned the search connectors. They're built on Graph, and these are in preview right now. There's 6 new Microsoft Search connectors. We've got FileShare, ServiceNow, SQL, the Media Wiki, Azure Data Lake, Salesforce. There's even a websites one. You can go in out to the web. You can just aka.ms/iwantconnectors, and you can actually see more about the Microsoft Search Graph connectors. And there are hundreds of partners. In fact, there's a gallery, and there's a link to that connector gallery where you can get to all this data as well. And I want to send this over to Ross. I did want to mention, I did put some thought around what are things that people can do around planning for Project Cortex. So I came up with some tactical things, some planning things, and some things around some research you can do to prepare for Project Cortex. This slide deck absolutely is going to be available to you. I will be tweeting it right after the event, and I'm going to be giving Ross a link to the slide deck as well. So the email that goes out, you'll have a copy of the slide deck. So anything you see in here, no worries, you've got a copy of this. And with that, let me hand things over to Ross.
Well, that was terrific. I'll tell you, very, very exciting. And the question, how do we make this thing work? And I guess the first question is, why do we want them? What's in it for me? Why do we even want to do this? And Joel, if you'll go to the next slide, and this is one of my favorites. If HP knew what HP knows, we would be 3 times more productive. Consider that, and consider the term store, and people have tried to make search work. People have tried to make search work. People have tried to get people within their organizations to tag documents. And why? Because we want to be able to find things. We organize our own homes so we can find things. We have the spices in one area, we have our tools in one area in the garage, so on and so forth, because we're more productive when we can find those things. And in the enterprise, the amount of intellectual capital that has been accumulated in all of the documents, extraordinary, extraordinary. And if we can surface all of that knowledge, guess what? We will be 3 times more productive. The elephant in the room. The elephant in the room, and it doesn't matter what applications we've looked at over the years, and we provided taxonomies for many, many different enterprise applications. For some reason, no one wants to manually tag documents. And that's the elephant in the room. And if we can solve that problem, okay, then we can surface all of that knowledge within the organization and make it accessible to all of our knowledge workers within our organization. And that gets us moving towards becoming much, much more productive. AI solves the problem. Project Cortex solves the problem, but it does need some help. And this is where we come in. And Joel, next slide, por favor. This is a slide from Microsoft slide from CJ10, who was just a great speaker. If you ever get a chance to watch any of her Project Cortex stuff, it's great. But you'll see the 2 arrows there, okay? Getting started in management, seeding Project Cortex with taxonomy term sets and acronyms, seeding them with lists of terms. This provides a foundation metadata model that the AI can use. And this is where WAND comes in. We've developed all these foundation metadata models. Joel, next slide.
I think this is a good opportunity to start the next poll.
Yep.
I'd love to find out where people are with taxonomy in SharePoint as an example. Because I think that a lot of people, you could say taxonomy in SharePoint is an area where there's a lot of immaturity going on, where people have maybe done some development and then kind of left it alone. There's other organizations who absolutely have done a lot of work with taxonomy, but I think that most organizations probably have a little bit in there, but just haven't evolved it. But I'm curious to know with this audience, because I think we have a very interesting group of people who are been doing more with taxonomies and are aware of taxonomy, especially if you're interested in Project Cortex and the AI.
And from all industries.
Absolutely. And I think that's the fascinating thing is there's no one Uber taxonomy that works for everybody. Every industry has different terms and different things that they want to then leverage. And I'm looking for a couple more votes and then we're going to move on. But we're essentially, the importance of taxonomy is something Ross is going to be diving into here. But and I'm looking at this that says, and in fact I'm closing it right now. And I'm just going to give you some of the results. It looks like most people here are actively managing and maintaining their taxonomies, which is awesome. Then there's the next level is we have taxonomy, but not actively managing it. There's a few that are currently building it, and a fairly small percentage. They're just learning a little bit who don't use it at all. And with that, we'll bring it back to you.
Yeah, we'll stick on this slide for just a second. Yep. So, seeding the Project Cortex with those managed metadata, with a foundation metadata model, informs the AI of what terms are important. And that's a key point. Joel, next slide, please. When we think about, Project Cortex, okay, Cortex, boy, that's something about the human brain. Well, the human brain, we inform the human brain with knowledge models. When we look at a small child, a little baby, okay, a little baby, the brain is empty, and all of a sudden they start to absorb information. We send them to school, and they start to look, and they say, the teachers, gee whiz, there's an alphabet, and there's numbers, and we start to inform, okay, those little minds, okay, with knowledge models, okay, that are important. The teachers are telling them these knowledge models are important, these numbers, these letters are important, these historical data points are important, so on and so forth. And we need to do the same thing with Project Cortex. And that's where the WAND taxonomies come in. So we call them different domains of knowledge within your organization. You're going to have accounting knowledge, domains of documents and accounting, customer service, legal, logistics, so on and so forth. We provide taxonomies, C taxonomies, metadata models, foundation metadata models for all these business functions. And for all of the business activities within your organization. We cover 42 different industries, insurance, telecom, the list goes on and on and on. And I want to digress first, just 1 second. When we think about, Project Cortex indexing all of the documents, okay, within the organization, they're in Word documents, they're in SharePoint, they're here, got all these connectors. But I talk to companies, I ask them, hey, how many acquisitions have you made in the last 5 years? One company will say 2, another 50, everything in between. Okay, what about the documents in the repositories, okay, that you're acquiring, okay, when you make an acquisition? To be able to surface that knowledge from the acquired company and make that available for all of the employees, all of the individuals within the new company. It's extraordinarily powerful. We go back to the HP. If only HP knew what HP knows, we'd be 3 times more productive at all of these acquisitions that this company's made. So we have taxonomies that address all these different vertical industries, all of your operational areas. Joel, the next slide, por favor. And if you develop one of the points of CJ Tan's slide deck is that if you want to start from a blank sheet of paper, you're going to be crawling in your Project Cortex project. If you want to start with this foundation metadata models to inform the AI of what terms we know are important, and of course subject matter experts, they're going to be able to additionally customize those foundation metadata models, which is part of the Microsoft model here. But that's going to get you out of the box very, very quickly. And we have a few testimonials we'd like to share with you. What to expect? Now, this is a company, one of our clients, that used the foundation metadata models for an AI application. Saved us a huge amount of time. We were able to deliver value immediately. And then they went on to say, we plan to continue, ongoing customization, subject matter experts, but immediately we saw good results, delivery of value immediately, velocity to value. Second, next one, what else to expect? Proving to be very useful, save us a lot of time in our deployment. We don't need to create a taxonomy from scratch. And next, and why do we want to create a taxonomy from scratch? We found that people are experts at what they do, yet not experts in taxonomy building. editing the pre-built taxonomies provides an easy contextual reference. What does this mean? We've got subject matter experts. They can take that foundation metadata model, look at it, working with Project Cortex. Project Cortex is going to identify more terms that it thinks are important, and that SME is going to be able to place those terms, okay, the terms that he or she feels are important, okay, in logical places within the taxonomic hierarchy, as opposed to getting a bunch of terms without a foundation model and trying to figure out, gee whiz, how do I build a taxonomy? How, what's this higher, what do I do with a hierarchy here? So that's what you should expect. This is going to jumpstart, okay, your project. You're going to have a lot of fun with it. You're going to be successful with it. And this is very exciting. Joel, back to you.
Yeah, I do think this is absolutely exciting, and I think this understanding that any work you've done on taxonomy is something that's actually going to accelerate is very helpful to understand that. You know, essentially, one of the stories I heard already is somebody who, the first time they set Project Cortex up, some of the things it was recommending were funny things like lunch, because everybody's calendar had lunch on it. And we have lunch and learns and things like that. So it's like, well, that's not very helpful for it to have lunch. Wouldn't it be great if it could focus on our taxonomies, maybe some CRM data, these taxonomies and so on that are going to be helpful to say, yes, those are the kinds of things we want it to focus on, so that it's more, so we don't stay so long in the crawl stage, because it learns based on that reinforcement. As humans and the computers kind of operate, the bots and so on, it's the relationship, building kind of a symbiosis between the reinforcement and what it's recommending, because it wants to know what's right, so it can continue to get right answers. So I don't know if you wanted to share your screen, but next. But I wanted to just say,
do we have time for that?
I think what we can do that while I'm even opening up the Q&A, because I think that was the last of it. Like I said, aka.ms/Project Cortex is where all it is. We've been told first half, now we're being told summer. I'm not sure if those mean the same thing, but I'm definitely very anxious to see Project Cortex go live.
Just give you a quick flavor of what taxonomies look like. And this is an example of an engineering taxonomy. Materials, engineering documents, engineering fields, engineering materials, material processing, broader terms, narrower terms. You want to think about this, how do we organize geography, continents, countries, states, cities, districts? How do we organize engineering fields, engineering materials? Well, there's engineering classes, materials. It's a hierarchy. So this is an example of engineering. Another example, IT policies. So these are the foundation metadata models that would inform Project Cortex. These are the terms that are important. Joel, back to you.
Yeah, I do see a couple of questions that people are asking. And if you want, I can probably reshare my screen just so people have the info to contact, how to get a hold of you guys.
That's good.
And
definitely want that.
Absolutely. I am available on LinkedIn if you want to connect to me. I've been doing a lot of kind of YouTube things lately, so feel free to connect to my channel. My tech blog is collabshow.com. My travel blog is travelingepic.com. I've got my email there too if you have any questions. But yeah, the first question is, I understand Project Cortex initial taxonomy comes from Bing. Is that true? If so, for industry-specific terms, it will be imperative to have a relevant term store in order to get good results. And I think that's a great question, because I do find that what can we expect from Project Cortex when we first turn it on? And what I've heard from the product team is like, give it a chance. That's what I keep hearing is like, check it out, have it look at your data and see what it recommends. So there's a little bit of chicken and egg here of, hey, well, maybe it'll figure something out, or maybe it's going to stay in that crawl stage for a little bit longer. I think that Microsoft's very interested in having you spend some time teaching it, but I think that as well, you absolutely will see acceleration based on a good taxonomy. I think there's no question about a good set of acronyms, a good set of a solid taxonomy that it can actually work with is going to be acceleration. I don't think there's any question about that part of it. Do we have an indication of pricing model for Project Cortex? That is something that we are expecting from Microsoft very soon. They have been fairly clear that it's not going to be E3, but that there may be some, and I don't even want to get myself into trouble here, but yes, there is information coming. Next question. Great webinar. Will Project Cortex hook into metadata in SharePoint, or will there be a first-class service made available in Azure? And this is something I feel comfortable talking about too, is yes, in fact, the managed metadata service is something that Microsoft has been investing heavily in. In fact, this million item plus term store is something that is shipping alongside. So basically the new managed metadata term store, you could say the modern term store is something that Microsoft has been working on and has been updating. And so yes, it is the SharePoint one. Do you know about availability in the government cloud? I'm not sure about that yet. It usually does follow after commercial. Next question. With Project Cortex, employees will spend more time navigating and enriching themselves than they did before, which is great. But do you think that we'll use it as a full potential during our working hours, because it's like a tsunami of information that we were not exploiting before? That's an interesting observation. Personally, I do think of this as like the internet. You know, when we first got the internet, we could go and search for things. With Project Cortex, it is kind of like now you actually have a way to navigate your organization's data. I don't think people will spend hours and hours just simply navigating. You know, it's like we used to call it surfing. Let's go surfing, go surf the web. Now, you know, it's just ubiquitous. We just, you know, we use our phones and check things when we're in a conversation and someone says, somebody should search for that, you know. Somebody should check the internet, see if there's a better answer. Let's ask Cortana or whatever.
Yeah, I think just to expand on that a little bit, okay, you know, today I wouldn't even venture out, okay, into my enterprise search because it doesn't work. So why bother? Whereas, okay, with Project Cortex, I will bother, okay, I will, because, okay, I'm going to have a positive expectation that I'm going to be able to find the information I'm looking for. My thoughts on it, Joel.
Yep. Next question, and this will probably be our last one. You will need a profound and universal taxonomy. Cortex would never be able to come up with the periodic table, but on top of the periodic table, it would work very well. So this is a user who's basically, sounds like they're agreeing with our idea that of this concept of a universal taxonomy, but essentially understanding the organization is where the rubber meets the road. And I absolutely agree that the organizational taxonomy may be something that if it's missing, absolutely missing, it's a problem. And it's going to start to build that. But the more that we can actually reinforce it and give it seed taxonomy, that will be an acceleration. Absolutely.
Well, yeah, we see it saving months.
Yeah.
Joel, great job. And to everybody, stuff. Give me a call. You got the contact information there, or send me an email. We can schedule a discussion, a web conference call. But appreciate everybody joining today. Joel, great.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us on another webinar. And you'll absolutely, this was recorded, and slides will going up very soon. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Ross.
Thank you. Everybody stay safe. Bye-bye.
Yep. See you.